Welcome to the Alien Probe Podcast. It is December 31st, the last day of 2022. I'm Doug, and joining me today is Korey. Korey, how's it going? Can you
It's
hear
going
me?
pretty good.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
Did
Yeah, thanks for having me on again. Yeah, it's going pretty good. Just watching the world kind of wash away outside.
Yeah, Deb's at Ansel Hoffman, and the parking lot's now part of the river.
Oh yeah.
I said, be careful because he throws the stick in for the dog. I go, the current's running pretty good. I don't want to lose the dog. And they've got a homeless, kind of interesting because they have a homeless camp that's on an island in the middle of the river at Ansel Hoffman, and there's probably five families living on that thing, and the releases have gotten a little bit, shall we say, higher out of Folsom Lake, and but they're still there. They're still got their encampments. They're still there. They're not don't seem to be worried that anything's going to happen. So I hope they get off there by the time the river gets high enough to wash away their tents. So
Yeah. I heard that a lot of them were leaving the area in anticipation of the flood.
they had a helicopter there flying over back and forth, and they had their um, sound, their megaphone or whatever you want to call it, the amplifier, and they're talking and telling them to leave. That it's gonna get bad. It doesn't seem. It's like rain. I don't know about there, but it's rain like a proverbial cow pissing on a flat rock here, and it has been like that for a while. So
Yeah, it pretty much hasn't stopped all night. I mean, it seems like it's slowed down a little bit right now, but yeah, it's I guess we need it every decade or so.
yeah, my
Refill the coffers.
we need water. It's been how many
Yeah.
the D word, the drought word, has been thrown about so many times here in California in the last few months, and I thought if we don't get any rain, it's going to be a problem. Now it's of course now it's like, oh, it's too much. It's going to flood Wilton or whatever. Do you watch the local newscast and pay attention to that?
Not really. I get like news alerts on from like various different things on my phone that talks about it, so it kind of keeps me up to date.
Yeah, we'll
But
watch the Channel 3 news and kind of it looks like they cut that guy that murdered those four people in Utah. Those four
yeah,
it's college
I
they
saw.
caught that guy.
Yeah, I saw something about that.
Yeah, I'm like, he's just another student. I'm like, good lord. I mean, he like fancied himself a forensic pathologist or something, and it was weird. The whole story isn't out yet, but I'm like, whoa, damn, it's ugly.
Crazy world.
So today we've got Fade to Black. We're talking about a YouTube segment of Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, and we're not really not Jimmy Church isn't the focus of this. More that Garry Nolan, the immunologist, Dr. Garry Nolan, immunologist, inventor, and academic, and guy who debunked the that little skeleton thing that looked like it was an alien. So that
That's
was him, right?
Atacama or
Yeah,
Atayama.
Atacama.
Yeah.
So, um, what
It
do you
it's
think
fu- and
about
I'm
Mr. Gary? I know we're work mates, so we talk a lot about this stuff at work, and we always think we should just record it there. Hopefully, we didn't
yeah,
use
yeah,
up
we
all
have
our good stuff.
no, there's plenty to talk about. Yeah, I think he's really interesting. I didn't really know a lot about him. I heard his name come up multiple times in different videos and things like that. So he's kind of new to me as far as who he is. But sounds like a really interesting guy. And it's always good to see somebody from the academic community or the scientific community that comes out in in a positive way for the UFO subject. Yeah, and the more that I read about him and see videos and interviews, the more kind of fascinated I am with him. Yeah, really interesting guy. I thought this was a really good interview. I don't know a lot about Jimmy Church, but he seems kind of interesting. got a bunch of guitars in the background, so I'm sure there's a whole story about that. But yeah, he seems to be involved in a lot. I haven't listened to any of his other interviews yet, but yeah, very fascinating interview. He did a really good job. And there was a couple times where it was kind of like, to me at least, like a couple jaw dropping moments. I thought that he said a couple things which really kind of stood out. So yeah, fascinating. Yeah,
He
it sounds like he leads a very fascinating life. I mean,
he's not worried about the stigma of the UFO connection. I mean, it seems he's got his own money. He's made a lot of money. I mean, I think he's invented some things in the you know world of um, you know medicine. So I think
yeah,
he's got patents or something. And so he mentioned that he's not worried about that. It's kind of like a couple other guys that are involved in this, but it almost seems like he's involved in a couple of different things, and it just seems like it's almost like I hate to say it, but smells a little bit like the Elizondo thing to me. I mean, he's definitely involved, but he can only say so much,
yeah,
and which is understandable. He can't if it's a matter of national security. Um, Obviously, he can't say, but he talks to people that are in the first hand knowledge of. He doesn't sound. We talked to Bill and I talked about this paperboy thing. So he was a paperboy and he saw a UFO fly
yeah,
over, and we won't talk about my paperboy experience. So then the let me see the also he said he had little men in his little beings in his room. Did you catch that also?
yeah, yeah. In fact, it's he mentioned a couple things. So yeah, he mentioned about the paperboy experience, what he had when he was younger, and then he talked about not only himself but his family were seeing little beings. And unfortunately, he didn't go into a lot of detail about that. I wish he had a little bit more as far as you know, give a little bit more context of what kind of experience it was, or what ended up actually happening. But the fact that he admitted to that, I thought was really fascinating. And he seemed pretty genuinely talking about it. So yeah, uh, yeah, like I said, very interesting guy. And then, like you were saying, as far as his connections, it does sound like he was obviously involved in some of the higher echelons. You mentioned being approached by the CIA, which I thought was really interesting. And I didn't quite understand what he was saying because he was talking about they approached him about
It's the.
um,
It sounded like it was connected to. We've talked about this before about getting close to the UFOs and people getting sick and having,
yeah,
and then
yeah,
he's somehow involved. I don't know if he's involved. I think he's involved in Project Galileo, and
yeah, with Davy Loeb.
also, and
Yeah,
now he says that there's people that are in Galileo that are in the scientific community that aren't coming out and admitting that they're with Galileo or that they're involved in the research for the UFOs. And
yeah,
so, I mean, there are scientists there that are still today that are, risking, feels like they're risking their careers if they come out with this. So it feels like it's there. He's talked to someone who is in the know, and they said that we definitely have some kind of craft. Now, I don't want to say interstellar because my feeling about where they might be from. Maybe, maybe they're from the future. You know, um,
yeah,
I'm going to go off track a little bit. The Rendlesham, is that the UK one?
yeah,
Um, I was watching ancient. I was watch Ancient Aliens from time to time, and that crashed. Even they deciphered the binary code, the 010101 whatever,
hmm,
and it had a bunch of again, I don't know how true all this is, but there's allegedly other people that have came up with the same answer that that was actually from the few they meant it came up on when they deciphered that code that they were actually from the could have been from the future because they mentioned 8100, the year 8100. So it was of course, caught my eye. I don't, when Ancient Aliens is on, I kind of halfway because I've heard it. It seems like I've heard every story, and they keep dredging up. They keep re-dredging up the same. It seems like the same thing and with a different angle, But that was a future thing, and then the rest of the were points on the globe that were, Mayan temples and things like that, and the pyramid, the Giza pyramid, and that kind of thing. But you know, anyway,
Yeah,
well, that's I just wanted to because I'm a proponent of the fact that I think that these things could possibly be from the future.
the extra tempestrials.
Yeah, and I'm still
Terrestrial.
reading
Yeah.
that book, Identified Flying Objects, and they also mentioned that they think Roswell. I mean, this guy talks about the autopsy and that the aliens had the large black eyes, how they have,
Hmm.
and that those were lenses. They removed the lenses, and behind those lenses were uh, what could be more described as what an eye that we would have. But
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
found that interesting.
Yeah, the Rendlesham one is a very that's one of my favorite UFO events. And it's funny, yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because some of that information didn't come out till later, where the guy that was exposed to the craft, and he said that that information came to him. I don't know if it was immediate or if it was later when he started writing the information down. And that's where he saw that, like you said, that binary code. And I think there was one that was like an island somewhere.
Yeah,
Um,
there was at least 6 or 8 locations,
yeah, yeah, which was really, and the
and
whole case is interesting.
this
It's
guy
almost,
wasn't a scientist, and he brought out a notebook and wrote down the binary code, and then obviously somebody else had to decipher it. But
yeah, he was one of the guards, I think.
he was a sergeant, yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
and he
and
just touched this ship, and it like put this thing in his head, and then later on down the road, he got a notebook and wrote it down. It's bizarre. I mean, it's a really bizarre story.
yeah,
It's cool.
but it's interesting because at the time they didn't know, and a lot of, I mean, this is pretty common information, but at the time they didn't know that they were storing nuclear weapons at that base. And so kind of to lend some credence to your theory, you almost wonder if it is a time travel angle to it, if they're almost coming back to like make sure that we don't push that button
Yeah.
or something. It's kind of interesting because they seem to be obviously fascinated with the nuclear weapons and anything nuclear really. So yeah, that's an interesting one. And then Roswell, like you mentioned, there's so many different theories, and there's the I don't know if you saw the um, she was an aide of Einstein. I think we've talked about this before. That
Yeah.
came out later. Well, she originally came out back in the '90s and talked about how she was there, all the things that happened, but she didn't want that information released. And then after she had passed, I think they came out with that information, and she had talked about how they were from somewhere really far away. Took them a really long time to get here, and then she had, they asked her a bunch of questions, and so yeah, who knows? I mean,
There was a recording of her that we did on one of the episodes.
yeah,
And
yeah,
she was an assistant. We talked about Einstein's people that
yeah,
accompany
yeah,
him.
yeah.
So,
Which
she
I
was
mean,
a young woman that he invited from a university, and
right.
she was with him, and she saw the the beings. I don't know if she saw the craft. She may have saw the craft, but they went into this out in the middle of like the desert, and there's just like a shack there, and they come in and a big shack, like a little house, and that's where they were keeping these beings. One was alive at the time,
Hmm.
but it's it was that was a really interesting story too. I mean, but she was 80 when they interviewed her. She was 80 something years old, and I can't believe somebody that was born 80 years ago is going to fabricate a story like that, just make it up.
Yeah,
It's
yeah. There's no
weird.
reason to.
Yeah.
And it would make sense that they would invite the top science. Well, I don't know if how they would keep them from talking, but they would invite the top scientists at the time to come and look at it because it would be something completely exotic to them. So to try to maybe figure out what it was, and she described the craft and the bodies, the craft,
Yeah.
quite a bit actually. So yeah, that was
Yeah, I find yeah, Bill and I did a segment on that. So it's yeah, that's a pretty compelling story. I mean, I like the ones that really show that there could be something to this. But again, Gary Nolan says talk to somebody in the know, and we have he didn't say we have multiple craft, but we're of course spin off into the Bob Lazar thing where he said, I think he said 5 or 7 at S4, and back when he was there.
yeah.
The 2 weeks that he spent there at 51.
Yeah, but it's interesting because the Gary Nolan talks about the private industry
Yes.
basically being in possession of these craft and exotic material, which makes sense. And if you look at the way that Bob Lazar, according to him, was recruited, it was through a private organization that did it. So it wasn't necessarily military. And then even Area 51, I mean, that's pretty much been Lockheed's playground for the last like 60 years.
Yeah.
So, and they specifically mentioned in this, I think they mentioned Lockheed a couple times. I don't know if it was Jimmy Church had mentioned it, and Richard, Dolan didn't want to say exactly that it was Lockheed, but he was kind of assuming that it was. And it would make sense that if anybody had that material, it would be a private, company. Then you can kind of keep it out of the purview of the government, which, then the government doesn't, except for the funding, doesn't really have a means to go and
Right.
get the information of what that is. So yeah, I think there's a whole lot of handshaking going on, and companies that do that. But yeah, I thought that was interesting because to me in the interview, he pretty much, without saying it, coming out and saying it, to me he said that they have it,
Yeah.
and that's what's going on. So I think Jimmy Church did a really good job of asking questions to get information, but not getting exact information. And but at least that's how I interpreted it.
We're never going to get to specific. Well, maybe we'll eventually get a specific, but it's not coming now. But he again knew people in the know, and you're right. Yeah, he said private industry, and he mentioned. I mean, I don't know if you caught it that um, that the private industry is. There's a guy that died. He goes, it's kind of like he used this example. It was kind of weird. A guy that died, and had this information, and then it fell to another person, either in this private industry or the military. It sounds like private industry, probably. So somebody dies that had got this, and they called it like a bunch of gold. You have this gold, and you don't want to give the gold away. You want to keep the gold, and the gold is the information. And this, so the new person has the gold, whoever this is, and they don't want to give it because are they making anything out of it? Are we doing anything with it? Are we? And we always talk about what possibly how quickly, and this is very common knowledge about how quickly we've advanced technologically since 1940s,
Mhm.
especially after the Roswell crash.
Yeah, um, I think that they've gotten a lot of information, and as much as they can within the confines of science, to what they can get from it. I think there's certain aspects of the materials that are within our technological means, and I think there's a lot that are without. Like Roswell, if you go by what Corso, Philip J. Corso, I think was his name.
Yeah,
He's the one that talked about all the technology that came after they found that craft. Which, if you look back, I mean, there is a kind of a renaissance as far as the certain technologies after 1947. So, but I think once you get past a certain point, and I've heard this referenced a couple times, Bob Lazar. There was another gentleman, I just can't think of his name right now, but he was one of the higher ups in the Air Force, and he talked about the drive system, and he just said that he wanted to know how this thing functioned, and they just could not figure it out.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's changed since that point. I think within physics they can probably determine how it functions, what type of fuel it uses, but as a to if you go back to Lazar and he talks about the heavy elements that are required that we just don't have access to. I think we're kind of limited on that part of it, but as far as the metallurgy and things like that, I think that we've definitely taken that technology and utilized it in stealth aircraft, as far as the electric components and things like that. I definitely think that we've used that.
Yeah, they
um,
mentioned also that Einstein's they've adjusted. I don't want to say Einstein's theory of relativity. I think it was one of his other theories. They've adjusted that and based it on because he was using when he did those computations because he was a freaking genius. He did those computations based on our ability to make a certain level of power. So now they've adjusted the theory
hmm
based on the amount of power that we can have now. Now we just, of course, fusion is
yeah,
something that
fusion.
is just and they talked about fusion and that it's eventually going to be available if we can put it all together, available to everyone, just like it's going to be on a power grid and. It's not going to be free. It's just like energy now. It should. I would say it should be free, but there is going to have to be an infrastructure to get this to your house. When
Yeah,
it's used
yeah,
for home electricity, it's going to be unlimited amounts of things we can use this with. But
yeah, definitely.
you know, there will be a fee.
Yeah, well, there always is.
We're never gonna get away with it for nothing.
No, I mean somebody's going to have to build that reactor, but once you do that, and it's not just Einstein. I mean, he changed his theory a little bit, but since that time, they've talked about, like, if you bring up, like, and I think Gary Nolan mentioned this too, about um, that at one point, to have a wormhole, they calculated that it would take all of the energy within the universe, or I don't know, a certain number of suns, in order to have enough power to be able to bend space like that. Well, they've
Right.
since, like, rerun the figures, and it's actually, so it
Yep.
keeps shrinking, and like Gary Nolan said, they've found some kind of cheat, which I think, given a long enough time span, we're going to figure that out. We're just not there yet. But obviously these beings, wherever they come from, they figured out that technology. Plus, they have access probably to heavier elements and things like that we don't have yet. So we're getting there, and I think, our understanding keeps getting better and better over time. To try to figure these things out. But it's fascinating, and I think it lends a lot of credence to the whole UFO phenomenon, that they're not just these mystical craft like they used to be 50 years ago. We can actually look at these things and say, okay, this technology makes sense within the science or the physics that we know and
Yep.
how they operate. So
I don't
um,
think we these craft that we see typically, not we see the people that see them typically. They're not inter. I don't. If they're interstellar, they got to be. They can't take time to get here. It's got to be a wormhole or it's got to be some interdimension. I mean, this keeps popping up. The
mhm.
interdimensional thought that that they're just sliding in and out of the the dimensions. That's my theory on Bigfoot too. I think Bigfoot's I'm really putting it out there now, but Bigfoot's an interdimensional entity if it exists at all. I don't that's a reason why I don't know why it's there and what he's doing, but it's. Do you believe in Bigfoot? Are you a Bigfoot proponent?
It's funny. I didn't. I didn't for a while, and I kind of, the last few years, I started kind of looking into it, watching shows, um, and there's a lot of evidence, and it's kind of the same as the UFO thing. A lot of people have seen it, so you're kind of going on, based on what they see. But at the same time, I think as technology's gotten better, people have captured more evidence, and there seems to be almost I think a connection between the two. Like where you see one, you kind of see the other. You see UFOs, you see Bigfoot,
Yeah.
and kind of like the UFO phenomenon, which there's like this kind of aloof, not I want to say like aloofness to it, where they're, for the most part they're benign, but at the same time it's like they're there and you don't know why they're there. But Bigfoot's kind of similar. It's like it seems to show up and then just kind of disappear.
They're,
So there's a
what
lot
were
of
they on
evidence.
vacation or what's the deal? You know,
Well,
they're
and then
always like up in the woods in the middle of nowhere, creeping up on people. It's
yeah,
like, okay,
yeah,
are they just observing people? You know, they know that's the only way because the way they look, they're not going to be able to go in the city and wander around and check people out because that would be a little unusual. But are they studying us up there? And it's usually the Pacific. It's everywhere. It's Pacific Northwest. It's the end. There's Sasquatch. There's a different kind. Different breed. You might say.
yeah.
In
You got the Yeti,
the Yeti's
and
a
then
different. It's the same thing, but it's somewhere else.
yeah, yeah. I don't know. Like it's one of those questions. It's just I don't know if we're ever going to have the answer to. It's
We never
I
seem to
mean,
find a dead one. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
yeah, they got
but
their. They had that one Josh, whatever that guy's name is.
the hoaxer.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, but how often do you see a bear carcass too?
yeah,
I mean, even a deer carcass, it's, you'll occasionally, because the elements and then scavengers and everything are pretty much going to take care of most of the evidence. But
yeah. But there's
if you're talking
something.
about,
Yeah, but there's
yeah,
something.
you're talking about something, but there's a good show. I know you and I have talked about it. It's the Expedition Bigfoot. That's the one I started
Yeah.
watching, and that's the one I think that they've taken the technology and looked and done the most with it. And they found some pretty interesting evidence. I mean, you're going, it's a TV show, so I get it. It's going to be edited and things like that, but at the same time, there's like camera footage and things that um, I don't think that they can. I don't know why they would fake it, but there's some pretty very very interesting things that they've caught on there. So yeah, and it's like I said, how often do you see those things? It's
Well, they get pictures of them. These some of the pictures are rather compelling.
yeah,
But
yeah.
the I don't know. Again, we don't. They're never dead. They're always there's.
Well,
It's like if we were exploring another planet. I mean, I guess we would gather up if somebody got hurt or killed. We would not leave them there. We would,
you'd hope.
you know what I mean? We would gather
Yeah.
them up, put them in a bag, and take them back to our spacecraft. We wouldn't just leave them there for the wolves to eat. So maybe they're just if they don't necessarily. We think of them as just one wandering around, but in Expedition Bigfoot, did they talk about them being in groups, or are they just individuals, or are they not? Are they not
Well,
team players?
they've had witnesses that have seen them in groups,
Yeah,
like they've seen families and things like that, and for the most part, they're pretty singular. But they literally will have like infrared footage, like they're watching one, and you can see it. I mean, you're assuming that's what it is. It's huge, it's massive, but it'll literally be there, and then all of a sudden it's just gone, like it's just disappeared. And then there's like orbs that people associate with them. They see them around them, and then a lot of times there's UFO sightings at the same time. So I don't know if they're just taking them on a field trip, if they're just dropping them off in the forest, letting them hang out for a little bit, you know, go to Humboldt County, pick up some weed,
yeah,
get back on the ship, take off.
could
I don't
be
know.
get high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's I think it's related. I think it's all related to that phenomenon. Uh, just based on time and the evidence and everything that you see on that. So,
So back to Gary Nolan. What are some of the other things you kind of were thinking about him?
so
He,
there was one. Oh, okay. So he talked about the Wilson Davis memo.
yeah,
Um,
that's the
that's a
Admiral Wilson.
Admiral Wilson, and then Eric Davis, who Eric Davis I think works within the aerospace community, I believe.
Yeah, then they had the memo. There's
Um,
a memo. That's the one with the memo, and they were in a car chatting. Is that one?
yeah, yeah. So he talked about Eric Davis, who he thinks is very Um, uh,
He's
what's the right word?
articulate and he can think. I know that's the one he was thinking. The guy can like photographic kind of memory. He can.
Yeah, yeah, and then also that he's, believable. Like what he's saying is that there's no reason that he would say that this happened. Of course, Admiral Wilson denied that ever happened, but he's in a different position to where that might be something he might have to do. But again, it was, he, like I said, he kind of indirectly confirmed that that was probably something that actually took place without actually confirming it, or
Right.
coming out right out saying it. So I thought that was interesting. But yeah, he said a lot of there was a lot of things. I took a lot of notes on it. The last one I thought was that kind of struck me was interesting was and he didn't say it. Um, Jimmy Church brought it up, but he talked about consciousness, which I think is a very important one. And he talked about the connection between consciousness and physics,
Right.
because there's a lot of um, theories out there that the two are kind of entangled. Basically, they're related to each other. And then he talked about that a little bit, and um,
Oh, he
that was pretty fascinating.
talked about the remote viewing and its relationship to. I mean, he literally said, is it possible? He didn't say it's possible, but he said, is it possible? And it might have been Jimmy Church that says, trillion years from now, we're just, all we are is thoughts.
Mhm. Yeah,
We're just thoughts. We're not even, we don't have a physical being. I think I didn't actually say that, but I think that's what he meant. And it's just a bunch of thoughts going. So we thought about, oh, we're going to make this planet, with all these, like uh, Earth, and this is like a
hmm
project, and it's all AI, and simulation theory. I mean, I mean, that kind of, I don't know if that's what they were insinuating. It felt like it, but I mean,
yeah.
have you
Well,
looked into simulation theory? Is that one thing that you've ever thought about?
yeah, I'm aware of it. It's just one of the theories out there of what our universe is, and it's completely possible. And it's one of those things that I just don't think that we're ever going to know. It's there's just, you're talking about these vast, vast, vast expanses of space and time, and could we just be a computer simulation that's running, a microsecond, but it's, translating to trillions of years on our side? Absolutely. Because we do it
Yeah,
all the time. We got video games that simulate reality. We've got, they run simulations all the time. So yeah, that's a fascinating one. And, but there seems to be, at least they kind of theorize, and there's a lot of, neuroscientists that are coming out and talking about this too, about consciousness, because we still just don't understand what it is. It's one of those things that we just haven't quite, we understand how, the brain functions, but at the same time, we don't know what is that, that 3% difference between us and our, simian,
yeah,
relatives, like,
Neanderthals and things. Yeah,
yeah, what allows us to, do like, science and music and all these
Why can't
things.
they? Because there's only two chromosomes difference or whatever.
Exactly.
You know.
And that's a huge difference. I mean, look at the difference, We're flying to the moon, and our cousins are not doing that. So I think consciousness, progresses, and I know this is why he didn't probably want to say it, because it's not, scientifically, I mean, they understand it, but it's really kind of still in the realm of kind of mysticism a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it something? Is it something that we should be studying or trying to figure out, or is it just, uh, you know, a figment of our imagination, or whatever it might be? But I thought that was interesting that he brought that up, because I do think they're related. And there's some very, fascinating things. I know we talked about before. I saw a picture of, they showed like how, I think it was dark energy. I don't think it was dark matter. I think it was dark, or maybe it was dark matter. And if you look at the way that it's striated out throughout the universe, it looks almost exactly like the neurons for the human brain.
Really.
So yeah, it's very. I mean, at least that was my perception of it. But I thought that was really interesting. So are we just in somebody's brain? Does each brain have a you
Yeah.
know, a universe. I mean, I know it's getting kind of crazy and off topic, but yeah, it's
Nothing's ever
who
off
knows?
topic here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's dark matter. Can they quantify that, or how do they know? I mean, can they put it in a jar, or how do they? What's the deal with dark matter?
No, it's so they have detectors, and they've built quite a few. Well, a few of these, I think. I know there's one in Japan that is underground. It's in a tank that has all these collectors, and because pretty much dark matter can go through anything, like it's not a
Right.
physical thing. So as it's passing through, they can detect it, so they know it's there. They theorize that it's causing what's partially causing the expansion of the universe. So that's part of it. But and then there's another thing I saw where they said that consciousness was something that was also that was somehow connected to dark matter. So there's all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm not a physicist. I wish I
No.
was, because I want to understand it better. But yeah, they know it's there. They can see it, but they're still trying to figure it out because it's not something you can just go put in a jar, go study it, kind of find out. So there's a likelihood that I heard another theory that these craft actually utilize dark matter and dark energy.
Yeah.
So they figured out a way to tap into that as a power source, which would make sense because if it's abundant, there's a lot of it out there, and if you can tap into that, then you've got like a that I don't know if it relates to that 0 point energy.
Right.
I don't know if you've heard that before,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think that's part of it too. So yeah, it's fascinating. I wish that science was a little bit further along because I want to know these things, and if I had a chance to talk to an alien, those are the questions I'd be asking them. Like, just how are you doing this? Like, what is up with this? Like, what's inside a black hole? If I had that ability to do that. So,
They
but
may not be able to tell you. It's like we're a worker. I don't know. It just goes.
I'd
How's this
still give it
ship?
a shot.
How's this ship? Yeah. How's this ship do this? I don't know. It just we get in, we sit down, and think about where we want it to go, and it goes. It's
Yeah,
like we don't really know what makes it run. We know it does. And
I'm
it
sure
can.
to them it's old tech. It's probably to them it's nothing. To us, it's magic. But
Yeah, it's black magic.
yeah,
We
yeah,
don't know how it's floating in anti-gravity. I mean, it defies the laws of gravity, and it's so fast. And a lot
hmm
of these are they just they look like they're. It's almost like they look like they look like they're going quick, and then vanishing. But are they going into another dimension? Or are they going? Where are they going?
into the future.
Into the future. That's right. That's
Yeah,
my campaign. That's my camp
yeah,
from
and
the
and
future.
that I think anything's on the table. I mean, really, I
Yeah.
don't think there's any one answer. I don't think that I think there's different species of aliens out there. I think that, I mean, they could be astronauts from the future. I don't know. Did you get a chance to watch that? It was on Discovery about the Whitley Strieber, the communion guy.
No, I didn't see it.
There's a woman in there that's talking about, she was one of the people that contacted him after the book came out, and she was talking about, I think she was younger at the time, and which she said when the beings approached her, she was like terrified. And the being asked her, like, why are you so, scared of us? And she said, because you're scary looking. And he said, well, you're going to look like us in 100 years. Or
Thousand.
it's
Yeah.
that's something, yeah, something to the
Yeah.
effect of that, which I thought
Yeah.
was interesting. It's like, okay.
Yeah. That's what.
So
Yeah. That's what the extra tempestural. Identified flying objects. That's what he says. He says this is that was one of the chapters, in that. That's what we're going to evolve into. I mean, there's. We're like we have less hair than we used to have. I don't know. I think we've talked about this before. How much
mhm.
hair did our forefathers have on them, on their arms? Used to growing up. I know my dad had like lots of hair on him. And nowadays you look at people and it's like we already have less hair.
Yeah,
It's a rarity that somebody has a hairy forearms. Either that or they're waxing them. I don't know. Maybe they're just
yeah.
waxing them. Could be.
Well, they just don't need it anymore. You're wearing clothes, and the clothes are
Yeah,
like rubbing on it. Yeah, so I mean that's interesting too, and I'm sure like Gary Nolan's probably, as a I don't know if he's it's a biologist or what exactly
he's
what
a
kind of
minuologist. He's a lot of things, but he's
oh in menu. Okay,
a minuologist. I think that's how you pronounce it.
okay, gotcha.
And
Um,
he's at Stanford, and I mean
mhm,
he's a big deal. And it's so funny. Again, he doesn't care. I don't care if and what people think because it. But he also talks about grants, and that kind of popped
mhm,
up about how he wants to like study, let's say UFO. He did this with some of his brain, his studies of the brain, or I don't know if it was drugs or whatever he was doing. But he says he gets I get the money, and I write a paper about something. He goes, this might not necessarily mean where I'm getting this money, mean why I'm really wanting this money. When the money comes in, then he directs it towards what he really wants to do. Because he says, if I tell them that this is what I really want them to do, they're going to think I'm crazy and never give me the money. So I thought that
mhm.
was an interesting look inside the grant process. If Bill was on, he would be. He's used to write. I think he wrote grants, and I don't know if he probably never had to do that, but it was interesting because he said because the UFO, he kind of insinuated that this UFO thing was he was doing that. He was getting money
Mhm.
with grants and then funnel it towards his interest in the UFO subject. So it's which he's I don't know where he's going to be able to go with it ultimately. Again, it smells a little like Elizondo, where this guy's out there, and Elizondo's. I mean, that ship seems to be sailing. I know he's involved with Galileo and all that, but he's kind of off the radar now. I mean, he was the biggest deal when you use his name as a keyword, and man, they're watching your stuff.
Mhm.
And now it's going away. It's fading. So we're
Well,
not
I
sure.
think, yeah, I think all the information he has, I think that we know about it. I think he probably knows a little bit more.
Yeah,
But yeah, I don't compare the two together because I think Gary Nolan, um, Lou came from like an intelligence background and then kind of worked his way up, and was involved in these things. It seems like from Gary Nolan, like that he was approached by them,
yeah,
really, which I mean, how awesome is that? You're sitting
yeah,
there just, I don't know, looking at, cancers or something, and then the CIA walks in and says, "Hey, can we want you to look into, some circumstances where people were exposed to something," and
yeah,
so I think, yeah, I mean, that's pretty interesting on that part. But yeah, I think he's got a lot coming out. I think that once they get that Galileo project going, and they're able to do some tracking and kind of see some see the frequency at like how many these things there are, how frequent they are, where they're going. I think that'll give us a lot of information as to you know uh, what exactly is going on with it. But I think we're going to know within our lifetime. I think we'll know definitively that what's happening. Basically, I think we're within the home stretch, and this might just me being you know too positive about it, but I think we're going to find out what exactly is going on somehow. I don't know how that's going to happen, but maybe somebody like Gary Nolan will come out and pop the top and be like, yeah, this is what's going on, and this is what we know.
yeah. And
Because it
there,
seems like,
he
seems like
also
he wants to tell us, but
he talked
he's
about what the ramifications are letting the genie out of the bottle. Not number one, but one of them is how are the religion, the people that are religious are
hmm
going to view this, this information of their things are a lot different than they thought it was, and and I always use this. I talked to different people about it. There's a wide range of responses to it. While religious people aren't going to care, to, it's going to be a gigantic. It's going to be a gigantic. It's kind of like, and always equate it to Contact, the movie Contact, when the Gary Busey character, which was the fanatical religious dude who blew up the first, hope I'm not, spoiler alert, they blew up the first
I don't think if you
mechanism
haven't
to
seen
go.
that by now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
I
mean,
know.
you're always going to have people like that, but you know, who's to say? Because religion's very interpretational, anyways. But who's to say as you get these higher dimensions, you got higher beings of existence and things like that. I mean, who's to say that there isn't a God or that doesn't exist? I mean, it's so I don't know about and maybe like I said, I'm just looking at it from like a kind of rosy kind of point of view, but um, like the Catholic Church has come out and basically I don't know if they admitted to the existence of UFOs, but they admitted to the possibility or
Yeah,
of being
they're
open to the possibility of UFOs. So I don't think that was a accident. I don't, you know what I
yeah.
mean? I think that was a kind of a precursor to they kind of see what's coming, and so they're going to have to kind of evolve, or But yeah, I don't know why. There seems to be something that just is really, really scary about this information coming out, and I just don't know if it's a if it's a military issue, whether it's they don't want maybe it's more to our benefit for them to think that we do have this material, or but we haven't come out and openly said it. But I think other countries have it too. I think China has them. I think Russia has them. They've got crash retrievals and things like that also. So yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I don't know why they don't just come out and say it, but there's something that's keeping them
Well,
from
they
doing it.
have. It's like the gold thing he was talking about. It's like you don't want to give it up to just anybody. If you
Mm-hmm.
give this tech, they're kind of concerned that if another like you said, I think every country has their version of a crashed UFO. Probably, if it's a crash, they're not just crashing here. They're probably
Right.
if they're why they're crashing. All that was a joke about they can't when they train pilot trainees. They just just crash. you know, you'd think they'd be you know a little more advanced than to just fall out of the sky, but I guess so. And only to fall out of the sky in the middle of the desert. They never crash into a neighborhood. Even though they're seen over neighborhoods and things, but they never seem to be. They're always out in the middle of. Of course, that's where the nuclear. I mean, if that philosophy is true, they're just looking at. They're concerned about the. If we're going to blow ourselves up, are they? Like I said, they're extraterrestrials. They're already here, and they're just trying to keep
Mm-hmm.
us from, destroying the world. They don't nuclear wasteland. They don't want for whatever reason. Maybe we did it, and they're trying to come back and prevent it. Who
Yeah,
knows?
or I mean, that the one in Brazil, the Virginia,
Oh,
or
that
how
was
you
a
pronounce
freaky.
that.
Yeah, that was a
That
freaky
was
story
uh,
there.
that was right outside of a town. I mean, it wasn't a big town, but I think they probably would avoid cities as much as possible.
Yeah,
You do see sightings over cities and things like that, but I don't know. Yeah, like we were talking last week about the oceans. I think if we ever get access to the oceans, I think we're going to find all kinds of stuff down there. Because
yeah.
if most likely, if something's going to crash or like a meteorite's going to strike, it's going to be somewhere in an ocean somewhere.
It's just
Uh,
interesting about space travel where we want to colonize. I mean, I guess that's the direction we're going, colonizing Mars. And we, it seems like if we're going to colonize another planet, can't we just put people in the ocean? And it's in that hostile environment in the ocean, which is just the ocean, the pressure and things. But now we can't even really. We've never really talked about putting a city underneath the sea. Like you see Aquaman or whatever.
yeah, no,
It's
I'm
got
sure
the
they got
big dome,
yeah, I'm
or
sure they got research stations and stuff around. But what's until they find
there's no
gold
houses. I
or
mean, there's nothing big.
platinum?
Yeah, there's nothing big, but we're spending all this time and money to go to other planets, but we're not. It's weird how we want, and we should be doing this. I support that, of course, but it's we should because we could be obliterated whether we're in the middle of the ocean or not. I mean, the whole planet could go. So it's
Right.
probably space travel and spacefaring, where
Yeah,
you know,
we're on a time limit, like on this planet.
yeah, I think so. I mean, it may not
Yeah,
be tomorrow, but something is, we're eventually going to get hit. Something, how many times have we been, exterminated to the point where I guess we'll always have survivors because we seem to come back. I don't think we come back from a microbe every single time. So whatever's happening, it's happening over and over. I've heard everywhere from it's happened 4 times to 40 times. We've been
mhm.
all the way almost extinct and came back, but it's hard to
Yeah.
say.
I
You
heard.
know,
Last I heard, I think there was like 12 that they knew of, or
we're up to 12.
yeah, like mass extinction events that have taken place. So
Well,
yeah,
yeah,
it's not a question of if, it's like when.
yeah.
Like
Some
we,
what is going to happen to the point where we're going to be destroyed enough to where we can forget about going to another planet, much less try to just survive. So it's yeah, we should go to another planet and then other planets beyond that,
or
so
even the
that
moon.
yeah,
Build
the
a base
moon.
on the moon. I don't know why they spent so much money on the International Space Station. It's like, why didn't they just build a moon base? Like,
Yeah, well,
it's
we
kind
abandoned the moon in the 70s, and then so yeah, then we did Skylab. So we moved to. It was money. I mean, the whole thing was. It cost too much to get there.
of,
I don't know how many times my sister's saying that SpaceX is lifting off like every other week down
yeah.
there.
Well, they're like doing resupply missions to the space station, and now
Yeah,
I think they're trying
I
to
mean it's
figure out
like
how
a
to.
regular thing. You know
Yeah, I
what I
think right
mean?
now they're trying to figure out how to get these astronauts off the space station because of the the hole in one of the lifeboats or something that I haven't really.
Yeah, he's gonna. Yeah, they're gonna. And I didn't really know. Bill was saying that the Russians and the Americans are have like a line in the middle of this thing where nobody, we're not speaking and we're not, we're at odds with each other. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's crazy because most of those guys are scientists. I mean, some of them are in the military too, but
Yeah, you don't really, when you're
yeah,
in the military, well, it might be more of a reason where if you're in the military, it might be more of a reason to be adversarial. But it isn't like it used to be. When I was in the military, it was the Russians were the Red Scourge and all this. And now we're kind of like, you know, it's,
hmm
it's, um, it's bizarre that could even happen. I mean, I guess it could, but it seems stupid. I mean, especially scientists, because scientists generally aren't like that. Like, oh, they're collaborative and they work together to get for the greater good. So
yeah.
I don't
I
really,
Well, Putin's been adversarial like for
yeah, this is bad.
the last 30 years or whatever he's been the president.
How is the war going, Corey? You paying attention?
I no idea. I think they're pushing into parts of Russia. I think was the last thing I heard. I think so. It sounds like the
Yeah,
Ukrainians are.
they bombed. They sent a missile and they killed 3 people at a Russian airbase within on Russian soil. So then Russia just annihilates their power system, and they don't have. It's the middle of winter. They don't have any power. It's
Crazy.
we're in there just we're pumping equipment in there and giving them billions of dollars. It's probably going to an overseas account somewhere so somebody can retire. But it's the whole thing's insanity. I don't even know why it's I they're just warlike. It's like it's been so long since we've been at war and we got all this stuff and we got to do something. You know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's just resources. It's like us fighting over the few resources we have on the planet where we need to start going out, and all everything down here comes from out there. It's created in the sun, it gets blown out. So there's nothing down here that we can't find out there. You got asteroids we can mine, the
Yeah.
moon. I'm not saying to go, strip mine the universe, but
We
we have.
will. That's what we do.
Yeah, probably. But I mean, there's a lot of it. It's like I said, the asteroids. I mean, that's a huge. I think eventually we're going to be doing that.
Yeah.
The helium-3 on the moon, that's going to be a big one. I mean, I don't know why we weren't up there, looking for that anyways. And that's related to the whole, how fusion works and everything. So, yeah, I think we will. But yeah, I don't know with Russia. It's bizarre that in the 21st century, you still have these, people doing these types of things. And, that I don't know. It's crazy.
Yeah, I don't. Well, we have the tech. I think the reason we're going back now is that we're technologically advanced enough. Because remember when we went there before, our cell phone has more power than the Apollo missions. So
Hmm.
now we're in a spot where we can actually make this move. And China's already there. I mean, by the time the U.S. is always behind the eight ball on these things.
Yeah.
By the time we get to the backside of the moon and actually do anything, it's going to look like Vegas in there with China and Russia. And we're always do go so slow. Artemis is not due until 24. It's going to take a year. Elon's like launching every week, and it's
Yeah.
like you said, he's got his heavy. What's his big dog rocket that can go?
I don't know if it's the Falcon Heavy or
Yeah, it's one of those. He's got one that's got this massive sounding name, and
yeah, it's
he
got like
could.
30 engines or something like that.
Yeah, so he's ready, and then they're fighting over who's going to have the lander, and it's meanwhile we're dinking around with they're going to be, and like we talked about before, he's going to be more involved than using shuttle surplus parts. Hopefully that they'll get smart, because now it's going to be different next time, because they're going to have people on it and they're going to send it around. We're not landing, but we're going to make a dry
So they're
run.
doing the whole Apollo mission over again.
Yeah,
Like
they're
that's what they did. They
basically
had a dry
doing
run.
they're because it's safer. We don't want to we don't kill anybody. You know,
The Chinese are they're gonna beat us there. I saw something. I meant to look into it. I didn't get a chance. The Chinese said that their probe that they sent up there found some type of exotic material on the moon.
really.
I don't know what that means. I don't know how much I trust that, because you got to take anything that they say with kind of a grain of salt. But they did say that they found something exotic, some exotic material or something up there.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Well,
I'll have
yeah,
to look
there's
into that.
already spaceships and cities inside the moon. You know that, right? You know.
Oh, I thought it was hollow.
Yeah, those are the cities. Well, it's hollow. That's why. Oh God, we could. Yeah, I don't want
Yeah.
to rehash my whole flaw. I already did it on the last episode, but yeah, there's cities, or we've saw spaceships or aliens or something when they were there last time. So it's I don't know. And there's a spire that's 13 miles high, and there's all kinds of weird shit. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like a
Probably is there
obelisk.
not? I hope there's something up there. That we were. There's that philosophy where another civilization was used the moon was actually a vehicle by which to come through a wormhole or something, and we rescued another civilization, and then we went from the moon, and then we went to Earth, and then all that happy stuff. So it's endless, the amount of speculation of what could be going. Hopefully, when we're there, we can rather than just walk around or drive around with our little car, the lunar rover, and
Yeah. I think they're going to find all kinds of interesting things. I think once we get to the moon and start going up there and studying it, I think they're going to find all kinds of stuff. I think Mars are going to find all kinds of stuff too.
I'm hoping, and I hope they'll
Yeah.
tell us rather than keep it a secret. There's civilians going with Artemis. There's civilians on there, and we civilians typically can't keep a secret. The military guys are pretty good at it, but you get your average person, they can't keep their mouth shut for nothing. So if
Well,
something's seen,
they've even come out since then and said talked about all the stuff that they've seen up there and all the
yeah,
experiences they had. So yeah, I mean, just nobody just really listened. They were like, yeah, because half the people don't even believe that we went to the moon.
yeah, that's the
Still,
other thing. Or the
yeah,
Earth's flat.
or it's
Yeah,
flat. Yeah, I
I don't want to
mean,
laugh about it.
it's
Sorry, Shelley. We'll keep an open mind. Did we not go to the moon? Was there did we have a base in the UK that we were getting ready to film it in case it failed? Just like
Hmm.
Capricorn 1.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's hard to say. All right, well, we're running up on an hour. We made it.
All
Next
right.
next time we're together, we're going to talk about all your stuff behind you. Are those VHS or
Oh,
those books? What are those?
those are books.
Have you read all
Yeah.
those? Are they about UFOs or just various different
They're
things?
mostly like art books, like art of movies and things like that.
You haven't built your model either, have you? Your
No, can you see it?
Yeah, the Lazar
Yeah.
model. I can see it. The sport model up there.
Yeah. And then I got the Roswell one too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, we'll wrap it up. Thanks for listening to the latest episode of the Alien Probe Podcast. We welcome comments, questions, or requests to alienprobepodcast@gmail.com. Visit us on Facebook. Check out our website, alienprobe.net, has all of our episodes. Check us on Twitter and Instagram at Alien Probe Pod. Like and subscribe to YouTube. Thanks to our senior producer, Robert Anthony. Thank you, Korey, as always. Dr. Bill should be back next week. We're rolling right along. Thanks again.